Um, William Carlos Williams once said, "Pick up your skirts, ladies, we are walking through hell." It is possible, it is impossible. You may have noticed a sign on the gangplank as you entered the room which says, "Dolente dolore." This is the inscription which Dante places above the entrance to hell. Through me you enter the woeful city. Through me you enter eternal grief.
Half of what I want to say is unbearable. The rest is inexplicable.
Lowry intended his work to be a modern extension of the themes of the Divine Comedy. It was called by one critic a work of art so beyond comprehension it could not be written. Under the Volcano, the only published work that Lowry ever completed to his own satisfaction is his Inferno. He wrote a legendary 40-page letter to his English publisher in which he explains, chapter by chapter, and with perfect clarity, the entire novel.
The novel can be read simply as a story, which you can skip if you want. It can be regarded as a kind of symphony, or in another way as a kind of opera, or even a horse opera. It is hot music, a poem, a song, a tragedy, a comedy, a farce, and so forth. It is superficial, profound, entertaining, and boring. It is a prophecy, a political warning, a cryptogram, a preposterous movie, and a writing on the wall. It can even be regarded as a sort of machine. It works too, believe me, as I have found out. The novel is concerned with the guilt of a man, with his remorse, with his ceaseless struggling towards the light under the weight of his past. The allegory is that of the Garden of Eden. The drunkenness of the consul is used on one plane to symbolize the universal drunkenness of mankind during the war.
As one of my buddies says, Lowry is probably twirling in his gap over the idea that he's remembered only for his mapping of hell. He traveled much farther than that and from a much higher altitude. If you attain that altitude, you can see the foundations of a massive city of interrelated structures. Ironically, however, the only completed structure is that of hell. My secrets are of the grave and must be kept, and this is how I sometimes think of myself. As a great explorer who has discovered some extraordinary land from which he can never return to give his knowledge to the world. But the name of this land is hell. It is not Mexico, of course, but in the heart. Jeffrey Furman, or the consul, the protagonist of Under the Volcano, acts as a witness for those in hell and reports with sympathy and rage and guilt. His Mexican friend, Dr. Vigil, guides him. Unfortunately, neither he nor his guide are completely conversant in the other's language. Lowry was a student of occult traditions. In Volcano, Lowry implies that a deeper level of desolation exists in the consul because of his abuse of these powers, especially alcohol. This creates a feverish element within which his focus careens, and a stream of consciousness that is both internal monologue and the voices of his familiars. My uncle Dino drew this diagram of the tree of life of the Kabbalah, the ancient Jewish system that describes man's place in the universe. He had to draw it out because he couldn't afford the Xeroxing fee. The consul describes his situation as stuck between the two lower states on the tree. Drink affected his aim.
The agonies of the drunkard find their most poetic analogy in the agonies of the mystic who has abused his powers. The consul, of course, has the whole thing drunkenly mixed up. Mezcal in Mexico is a hell of a drink, but it is still a drink that you can get at any cantina. But mezcal is also a drug. It would appear that the consul has fuddily come to confuse the two.
The consul seems to believe that man can achieve redemption from the misery of his attachments by drinking his bitter cup to the dregs. Blake says, if the fool would persist in his folly, he would become wise. My wife Lily says, the only way out is through. The consul says, I am too sober. I have lost my familiars, my guardian angels. I am straightening out. Lowry drew on Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus and even more extensively on Goethe's Faust in the writing of Under the Volcano. Mephistopheles tells Faust in Goethe's Faust, for where we are is hell. Talk not of a wife. Faust causes pain and eventual death to his love Gretchen, herself an example of selfless love. She's also called Margaret, coincidentally, another variation of which is Marjorie. I'm not making this stuff up. You may know that Faust does cheat the devil, precisely because he sought transcendence, even if it was through the back door. But the way is always shown by woman. The eternal woman draws us ever onward. Another influence on Volcano was the American film Mad Love with Peter Lowry, a remake of the Austrian silent film The Hands of Orlok, or Los Manos de Orlok. The mad Dr. Gogol, get it, in love with the actress Yvonne, tries to destroy her husband Orlok by convincing him that he has grafted him with the hands of a murderer. Gogol's steel and leather disguise can be seen as a metaphor for the carapace of guilt that Lowry felt was likely to smother him. As he said, an artist with a murderer's hands, that was the ticket. But what's the reason for the volcanoes? The volcanoes represent the warrior Popocatépetl and his beloved Itzcoatl. Popocatépetl continues to pour down fire on the earth in a blind rage over the death of his beloved. Make a mental note of the rage. Lowry called Volcano a machine that revolves. The novel begins a year after the tragic death of the consul and his wife on the Day of the Dead. Over the town, in the dark, tempestuous night, backwards revolved the luminous wheel. On the Day of the Dead, all the dead return for a day, and the characters, by implication, return again and again to play their parts as in a puppet show, entangled in the web of their own actions and the resulting consequences.
The wheel is, of course, the Ferris wheel in the square, but it is, if you like, also many other things. It is Buddha's wheel of the law, it is eternity, it is the instrument of eternal recurrence, the eternal return.
Who will cure a man of the wheels? They're worse than the Raja shakes.
Lowry often used his own misunderstandings to drive his plots. The consul's mangling of a mistranslated menu features stepped-on eggs, poxy eggs on toast, spectral chicken of the house, exquisite mole, and sea sleeves in his ink. There's a more complete menu in your program, but don't try to order from it. The signs and slogans that suddenly appear, sometimes without context, can be calls for compassion. Sickness is not only in body, but in that part used to be called soul. Poor your friend, he spent his money on earth in such continuous tragedies. She is the virgin for those who have nobody them with, and for mariners on the sea. No se puede vivir sin amar. One cannot live without loving. They can be statements of imminent judgment. Do you like this garden? Why is it yours? We evict those who destroy. Or ominous, half-past tree by the cock. Add this to the engine noises and the inner voices plaguing the consul, and you have the Tower of Babel as a non-stop radio station with Lowry himself at the controls.
There are
1,000 writers who can draw adequate characters till all is blue, for one who can tell you anything new about hellfire. And I am telling you something new about hellfire. Despite a few spoilers, what follows is a quick summary of Under the Volcano. The action takes place on the Day of the Dead, November 2nd, 1939. It is the story of the doomed British ex-consul Hugh Furman and his estranged and equally doomed wife, Yvonne. Yvonne returns to their home in Cuernavaca in a last effort to save their relationship, while the consul pursues his efforts to drink away his guilt in isolation. We find that in a letter, he had begged Yvonne to return, but he never mailed it. She has, in effect, answered his call, but he refuses to respond to her. Yvonne has it right when she says, "You loved yourself. You loved your misery more than I." Lowry sets the action at the consul's house and surroundings in the area of Cuernavaca where he and Jan Gabriel lived. Hugh Furman, the consul's brother and Yvonne's former lover, has arrived before Yvonne's return. Jacques Laruelle, another former lover and filmmaker, lives in a tower with "One cannot live without loving" painted across it. They wander around town while the consul disappears to drink and eventually decide to take a bus trip to a bullfight. During the trip, they come across a dying campesino, a pelado, or peeled one, who preys upon those less fortunate, brazenly takes the dying man's silver. The consul meanders over to a totally depraved cantina called the Farolito, the paradise of his despair, which the consul has probably mistranslated as the little lighthouse, which Lowry felt invites the storm. During a feverish episode, the consul reads a packet of letters from Yvonne pleading for reconciliation, while he alternately rages at Yvonne and determines to follow the hell-bent path he has set for himself. In the course of an omnidirectional dialogue, he gets into an argument with drunken fascist paramilitary over the murdered campesino's horse and is shot. Yvonne is killed by by the same runaway horse as she approaches the Farolito searching for the consul. The consul's body is thrown down into the barranca, the sewage ditch, which is Dante's eighth circle of hell. A dead pariah dog is thrown in after him. Stunningly, as he drifts towards death, he remembers the phrase, "No se puede vivir sin amar." How could he have thought so evil of the world when succor was at hand all the time? "Ah, Yvonne, sweetheart, forgive me." Strong hands lifted him.
The Consul's Last Hour, a Day of the Dead pantomime.
I choose hell, right? Because I like it. I love hell. I can't wait to get back there. I'm running. In fact, I'm almost there already.
You were Jew, Chingao.
Chingao. My name is William. William Blackstone. My name is William Blackstone. I am a writer.
Writer? You anti-Christian Jew. What for you tell lies?
No. I tell you my name is William Blackstone.
You are no a D writer. You are D a spider, and we shoot a D a spiders in Mexico.
You killed that Indian and tried to make it look like an accident.
You were D a spider, Jew Chingao.
Only the poor, only through God. Stop walking in your sleep.
I blow you wide open from your knees up, Pilado.
Christ, this is a dingy way to die.
Compadre! Compadre!